we have critically examined two misconceptions about language. One, language is script, and two, language is grammar. We have examined the pedagogical implications of these misconceptions. Teachers who go for teaching prescriptive grammar probably are not aware that the rules and definitions they teach do not work when it comes to language in use. And this is why we make a fundamental distinction between prescriptive grammar and descriptive grammar. Let us probe deeper and find out how grammarians create misleading grammar concepts and propagate them through grammar books.
How many tenses are there? Again, you'll be confused, I know.
Basically 3, and then if you count the null, there are 12 tenses.
12 tenses. How many of you agree with Sabana? Raise your hand. She claims there are 12 tenses.
I agree.
Do you agree? Any other difference of opinion on this statement? No disagreement. Some grammar books say there are 12 tenses in active voice and 8 tenses in passive voice. Look at the display. These are the 12 tenses described in traditional grammar. There are 3 basic tenses: the present, past, and the future. And the grammarians call them simple present, simple past, and simple future. And you have the continuous tense, and you get further ramification as present continuous, past continuous, and future continuous. And you have one more ramification, including the perfect. So you get present perfect tense, past perfect tense, and future perfect tense. And again you have the combinations of the continuous and the perfect. So you get present perfect continuous tense, past perfect continuous tense, and future perfect continuous tense. And grammarians also list down tenses that do not have the passive voice. So you have the present perfect continuous tense, past perfect continuous tense, future perfect continuous tense, and the future continuous tense.
Tenses that do not have passive voice: present perfect continuous tense, past perfect continuous tense, future perfect continuous tense, future continuous tense. So according to the traditional grammarian, there will be 12 tenses in the active voice and 8 tenses in the passive voice.
So if you exclude them, there will be 12 tenses in the active voice and 8 tenses in the passive voice, and on the whole you get 20 different tense forms. The problem with the traditional classification of tenses is that it doesn't approach the auxiliary as a system comprising elements such as tense, modal, aspects, and the passive. There are 2 aspects in English language: the perfective aspect and the progressive aspect. Now the progressive aspect is described as the continuous tense form in traditional grammar. Now look at the diagram. As you can see here, there are two tenses, the present and the past. There can be non-tense verb forms also. The infinitives are non-tense verbs. The perfective aspect is realized by the disjoint morpheme have and en. Have can stand independently, whereas en is a suffix that has to be attached to the nearest verbal element. Just like the perfective aspect, the progressive aspect also is a disjoint morpheme. Be and ing. Be appears in one position and ing gets attached to the nearest verbal element. The passive is realized by the disjoint morpheme be and en. Be appears in one position and en gets attached to the nearest verb. Now look at the sequence in the diagram.
The auxiliary system: tense, modal, aspects, passive. Tense, plus tense, minus tense. Modal, will, shall, may and can. Aspects, perfective aspect, have and en. Progressive aspect, be and ing. Passive, be and en.
Perfective, the progressive, and the passive are optional components of the auxiliary system. Tense, whether it is plus tense or minus tense, it is an obligatory component.
Imperatives. The imperative contains tense. For example, stand up, pick up the pencil, etc. Sentence, noun phrase, verb, minus tense. Stand up.
Look at the diagram showing the tense and the verb combinations. The main verb gets inflected by either the present tense or the past tense, depending on which we get the present tense or past tense constructions.
Tense, verb combinations. Present tense and past tense sentences contain the tense component, that is, present or past. Examples: the child sleeps well, the child slept well. Sentence, noun phrase, verb. The child plus tense, present or past. That's auxiliary. Plus verb. This is how we get the verb forms sleeps and slept.
The syntactic position of modal can be occupied by any modal verb such as will, shall, can, and may. The verb do also appears in the same position. This happens when there are no other modal verbs. When the present tense is attached to these modal verbs, the verb forms do not change. But when the past tense is attached, these verbs change their forms. So we get would for will, should for shall, could for can, and might for may, and did for do.
Tense, modal, verb combinations. Examples: the child will sleep well, the child would sleep well. The syntactic position of modal can be occupied by any modal verb such as will, shall, can, and may. The verb do also appear in the same position. When the present tense is attached to these verbs, their forms do not change, whereas when the past tense is attached, we get words such as would, should, could, might, and did. Tense always gets attached to the verb that immediately follows it. Once tense gets attached to the verbal element, it will not inflict any form that follows it.
Look at the diagram that shows how the modal verb gets inflected by tense.
Tense, modal, verb combinations continued. Sentence, noun phrase, and verb. The child will sleep. The modal will gets inflected by the present tense to get will and by past tense to get would.
Now consider the tense perfective verb combinations. If there is no modal verb, the tense component gets attached to the perfective aspect. That means the have element of the perfective aspect. And we get verb forms like have or has or had. The choice of have or has in present tense is decided by the number agreement. When past tense is inflected on have, it becomes had. Look at the example. Child has slept. If it is the plural number, the children have slept. So this is the present perfective. Look at the next example. The children had slept. This is past perfective.
Tense, perfective, verb combinations. If there is no modal verb, the tense component gets attached to the have element of the perfective aspect to get have or has as demanded by the number agreement. Examples: the child has slept or the children have slept. The child or children had slept.
Let us analyze the present progressive constructions. If there is no perfective aspect, the tense component gets attached to the be element of the progressive aspect. This is how we get the sentences: the child is sleeping and the child was sleeping. See the display. If the subject noun phrase denotes plurality, we get, as an example, the children are sleeping. And if it is past tense, we get children were sleeping. When the subject NP is first person I, be is inflected as am. So we get the sentence I am sleeping. And in the past tense form, we get I was sleeping.
Tense, progressive verb combinations. Sentence, noun phrase, auxiliary, verb. Tense, progressive aspect. The child, B-I-N-G, sleep. The child is sleeping. The children are sleeping. The child was sleeping. The children were sleeping.
Let us analyze the tense perfective progressive verb combinations. In this sequence, tense gets attached to the have of the perfective to get have, has or had. The en on the perfective gets attached to the be component of the progressive to get been, and the ing of the progressive component gets attached to the main verb. See the diagram.
Tense, perfective, progressive verb combinations. In this sequence, an of the perfective gets attached to the be of the progressive, and the ing of the progressive gets attached to the main verb. Examples: child has been sleeping. The child had been sleeping.
In the absence of modal and aspects, the tense component searches for the next verb form in the construction. If there is a passive, it can attach to the be element of the passive. The en element of the passive component attaches to the main verb. Look at the examples. The child is taken to the hospital. In past tense, we get the child was taken to the hospital.
Tense, passive verb combinations. In the absence of modal and aspects, the tense component searches for the next verb form that is available. If there is passive, that is be and en, it can attach itself to the be element of the passive. The en element of the passive attaches to the main verb. Examples: the child is taken to the hospital. The child was taken to the hospital.
As I have already mentioned, present tense attaches to be to get is, and past tense will yield was. The verb forms are, me, were are also possible depending on what comes as the subject. As we have seen in the earlier examples, if there is a modal, it will bear the tense component. The en of the perfective gets attached to the main verb. The element have of the perfective remains as a bare verb.
Tense, modal, perfective verb combinations. As we have seen in an earlier example, if there is a modal, it will bear the tense component. The en of the perfective gets attached to the main verb. The element have of the perfective remains as a bare verb. Examples: the child has slept. The child might have slept.
This is the tense, modal, progressive and verb combination. In this construction, tense is attached to the modal and the ing of the progressive is attached to the main verb. The be element of the progressive remains as a bare verb. See the examples. The child may be sleeping, or the child might be sleeping.
Tense modal progressive verb combinations. The modal progressive verb combinations are also possible. Tense is attached to the modal, and the ing of the progressive is attached to the main verb. The be element of the progressive remains as a bare verb. Examples: the child may be sleeping. The child might be sleeping.
Let's consider the tense modal passive verb combination. The tense attaches to the modal, and the en of the passive attaches to the main verb. The be element of the passive remains as a bare verb. Examples: the child will be disturbed, or the child would be disturbed.
Tense modal passive verb combinations. In this combination, tense attaches to the modal, and the en of the passive attaches to the main verb. The be element of the passive remains as a bare verb. Examples: the child will be disturbed. The child would be disturbed.
Let us consider the tense modal perfective progressive verb combinations. In this, tense gets attached to the modal, en of the perfective gets attached to the be of the progressive, and the ing element of the progressive gets attached to the main verb. And the examples are: the child may have been sleeping somewhere, the child might have been hiding somewhere, and so on. Now, as you can see from these examples, the suffix part of the auxiliary components gets attached to the nearest verb that can stand independently.
Tense modal perfective progressive verb combinations. Tense get attached to the modal. En of the perfective gets attached to the be of the progressive, and the ing element of the progressive get attached to the main verb. Examples: the child may have been hiding somewhere. The child might have been hiding somewhere.
We have the tense modal perfective passive verb combinations also. In this, the tense gets attached to the modal verb. So in this example, it could be may or might, depending on which tense gets attached. Have of the perfective remains as it is, but the en element attaches to the be of the passive. The en of the passive, in turn, attaches to the main verb. And the examples are: the child may have been disturbed, or the child might have been disturbed.
Tense modal perfective passive verb combinations. The tense gets attached to it thus yielding may or might depending on which tense is attached. Have of the perfective remains as it is, but the en element attaches to the be of passive. The en of passive in turn attaches to the main verb. Examples: the child may have been disturbed. The child might have been disturbed.
Let us analyze the tense progressive passive verb combinations.
Tense, progressive, passive verb combinations. In this combination, tense gets attached to the be of the progressive aspect. The ing of the progressive attaches to the be of the passive, and the en of the passive is attached to the main verb. Examples: the child is being disturbed. The child was being disturbed.
It is essential for teachers to understand how language works and what phenomenon is involved. The underlying phenomena will be observable only when we approach language as a system of systems and not as a baggage of various linguistic facts. Let's examine a few sentences containing the modal verb will. Look at the slide. I will leave the town tomorrow. So this is a future event. So there is futurity in this sentence. Oil will float on water. This doesn't refer to future time event, but expresses a general fact, a scientific fact. Oil always floats on water. It will rain now. It's a prediction. It can be paraphrased as I predict the event of raining right now. The principal will be at the office right now. It's a possibility. I will pay the bill. Willingness. It means I am willing to pay the bill. You will do the work right now. It's a command. I promise that I will call you every day. It's a promise. It is clear from these examples that all sentences that contain the modal verb will do not indicate future time reference. Not only that, we can talk about future events using the present tense as well as the past tense without using the modal verb will. Consider these examples. My friend arrives from Delhi tomorrow. I'm going home next week. There is no one-to-one correspondence between tense and time reference in English. You can use the present tense, to talk about the present, the past, and the future. Similarly, we can use the past tense to talk about the past, the present, and future. There are three contexts where we can use the present tense to talk about a past event. Look at the examples. India wins freedom in 1947. The second context where you can use present tense with a past time reference is in criticism. Shakespeare writes good plays. You can also use a present tense verb in dramatic narratives. Yesterday night, I wake up at the middle of the night. I hear a noise outside. We are familiar with how we use the present tense to talk about present time events. We can use the present tense to talk about future events also. Let us see how we use the past tense with present time reference. Look at the examples. Could you do me a favor? Now this is a request and we use the past tense of the verb will. Or you are talking to somebody like the district collector, you can say, sir, I wanted to talk to you. Simply means, sir, I want to talk to you now. It's only a very polite way of saying it. Let us see how we use the past tense with future time reference. You may not be very familiar with this. For example, look at the slide.
Right? So, as I told you, this problem happened, which we call it as Latinate fallacy. Fallacy is something wrong. In Latin grammar, there are very clearly specifiable three tenses. Okay, and when the first grammar book was written, all the rules relevant for grammar was applied to English. So because Latin was claimed to be the classical language, perfect language. Like in India, people say Sanskrit is the perfect language. Everybody has a respect for his own language. All right. So the rules that are relevant for Latin were simply, copied and pasted in the language of English. It doesn't work. This is the problem with the prescriptive grammar. You prescribe. The responsibility of a grammarian is to not to prescribe rules, because whatever rule you prescribe might break. Is to describe grammar, how people are using language in 2021. So a grammar book written some 20 years back may not be relevant today. But people are comfortable with Renan Martin, Nesfield, all kind of things.
Dr.
So what's the
Anandan,
point?
there is an example in the chat. Somebody said, I was wondering if my computer was ready yet, as an example of past use for present.
Exactly. Now, if you think you will get it, only thing, you are, sticking to the definition. Forget definition. Definitions are very misleading. They don't help us in any way. Of course, there are definitions. I am a linguist. I also use definitions. I say alpha governs beta if alpha C commands beta. You don't make any sense of that.
The slide shows the definition of government and the definition of C command. You can see these kind of definitions in the literature on transformational generative grammar, in short, TG grammar, as conceptualized by Chomsky. But this kind of definitions have nothing to do with the definitions and rules you can see in prescriptive grammar books.
And the stated fact is that the grammar book deals with what you can see in the periphery of language, okay, like the tip of an iceberg. The most of language is within, and that grammar is there. Nobody has to teach it. Nobody knows about it. It is there. And This is why Chomsky says you are born with a language, with a system, with a grammar of that. You are not aware of the grammar inside you.